Welcome to The Explainer. We're here to break down the big, complex stories into something you can really wrap your head around. Right now, the Persian Gulf, a place that's, always simmering with tension, is basically on a knife's edge. And this time, it's a massive military standoff between the US and Iran. And believe me, the entire world is watching. And when you hear a quote like that, you know it's serious. This isn't just talk. So let's really dig into what this armada is, because the US has just positioned an incredible amount of military power right on Iran's doorstep. Okay, so we're diving into the brink of war. And I gotta say, this is way beyond just flexing muscles. We're talking about a serious deployment of firepower, and it's dramatically cranking up the temperature in the region. So, what are we looking at here? Well, the US has rolled out the heavy hitters. You've got the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier. That's basically a floating city of military power. Then you add in guided missile destroyers and all these advanced jets, F-35s, FA-18s. And to make sure nothing touches this stuff, they've set up a pretty serious defensive shield with Patriot and THAAD missile batteries. But Iran, they're not just going to sit back and take it. Nope, they're responding with their own show of force. They've deployed, get this, hundreds of fast attack boats right near the US carrier. They've got a drone carrier in position near the Strait of Hormuz, and they're planning a big 2-day live fire exercise. Oh, and just to top it off, they've announced joint drills with China and Russia. It's a very clear signal. So the big question is, why now, right? Why is all of this happening at this exact moment? Well, it didn't just pop up overnight. To really get it, you have to look back at a really brutal, really fast war that happened just a few months ago. And that brings us to the scars of what's being called the 2025 war. The main trigger for everything we're seeing today was this fictional 12-day war between Israel and Iran back in June of 2025. Think about this. In just under 2 weeks, Israel launched something like 360 separate attacks across 27 of Iran's provinces. We're talking about a massive, incredibly precise air campaign that struck deep inside the country. It was, without a doubt, a huge show of military power. And the human cost, well, it was steep. You're looking at about 1,100 total fatalities. And what's really tragic is that a big chunk of those, around 440, were civilians. On top of that, Israel managed to take out 30 senior Iranian commanders. That's a huge blow to their military leadership.
The war also absolutely crippled Iran's missile arsenal. Look at this. They had about 1,000 of their ballistic missiles just wiped out in these strikes. They fired off another 500 at Israel, so all of a sudden, a huge piece of their deterrent is just gone. It left them with maybe 1,500.
So what do you do after a shock like that? Well, in the aftermath, Iran is scrambling. They're rebuilding their nuclear facilities, but this time, they're digging them deeper underground. Why? Because they're desperate to protect them from the kind of attack they just experienced, especially from those deep penetration bombs that hit their Fordow facility. This tells you everything about their mindset right now. But, this 2025 war, as bad as it was, it's really just the latest flashpoint. To get the full picture of this hostility, this deep-seated mistrust, you gotta rewind the clock. We're talking more than 70 years of really turbulent history. It really starts all the way back in 1953 with a US and UK-backed coup that overthrew Iran's prime minister. That set the stage for decades of resentment. Then, of course, you have the 1979 Iranian Revolution and the US Embassy hostage crisis, which completely severed ties. For a minute there in 2015, it looked like things might change with the Iran nuclear deal. But that hope kind of fizzled out when the US pulled out of the deal in 2018. And then you have the 2025 war. Each one of these events is like another layer of bad blood. So all of that history, all that baggage, it brings us right back to today. And what we're seeing now is a really dangerous chess match. On one side of the board, you have the US military buildup. They're banking on overwhelming power, aircraft carriers, fancy jets, missile defense, to basically deter Iran from doing anything. But on the other side, Iran's got its own countermoves. They're not trying to match the US ship for ship. Instead, they're using hundreds of small, fast boats and planning these exercises to show they can cause absolute chaos for shipping in the Gulf. This whole approach has a name. It's called an asymmetric naval strategy. And it's a classic playbook for a smaller force going up against a giant. The idea is to counter a bigger, more high-tech enemy by using unconventional tactics, like swarms of little high-speed boats and short-range missiles. It's all about turning the Persian Gulf into a potential trap. So how does it work? It's basically a 3-step plan. Step 1. deploy swarms. You use hundreds of these fast little boats to just overwhelm the defenses of a much bigger warship. Step 2 is the missile threat. Firing short-range missiles from these small mobile boats makes them super hard to target. And step 3, the big one, choke point control. This is where they threaten to mine or just shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is, a critical artery for global oil.
And let's be clear, this is not a new idea. Iranian officials have been threatening to disrupt shipping in the strait for a long, long time. It's their ultimate leverage, their way of inflicting serious economic pain on the United States and its allies.
Okay, so this is where it gets really serious. With all this posturing, what are the real military options on the table? What would an actual conflict look like?
For the U.S., a full-scale ground invasion is probably off the table. Instead, some analysts point to things like a capture-or-kill operation targeting Iran's supreme leader himself, or maybe targeted airstrikes on key military sites using standoff munitions to keep U.S. forces safe. But the note here is crucial. These options are all described as very fraught, and nobody's sure they'd even work.
And Iran's counterpunch? You can bet it would be fast and it would be furious. We're talking about ballistic missile and drone attacks aimed right at the USS Abraham Lincoln, or targeting major U.S. bases in the Gulf, like the big one at Al Udeid in Qatar. And of course, there's the ever-present threat of mining the Strait of Hormuz. And remember, Iran is sitting on an estimated stock of over 2,000 ballistic missiles. They have the firepower to do real damage.
All of this leads us to, well, the unwritten next chapter. We are in a moment of extreme uncertainty, not just for the region, but for the whole world.
What we're seeing is this incredibly tense mix of deterrence and preparation. On one hand, the U.S. is trying to reassure its allies and scare Iran into backing down. On the other, they're getting ready for anything, from purely defensive actions all the way to precision strikes. It's a very, very delicate balance.
And that really leaves us with the final sobering question. In a region that is just full of tripwires, can deterrence actually work, or is a devastating miscalculation almost inevitable? That's the terrifying reality of being on the brink.